Hi, occasionally I get requests for me to share my withdrawal story, my healing story, and typically people I just tell them like go to Benzo Buddies, look up. Um, I was Eli 1111, Eli 1111 on Benzo Buddies, and there's Eli's story there in that. But I know, well, yesterday I got a request, but this particular individual couldn't read, like the print's too small and doesn't have a computer, and then the cell phone, I guess that the print's too small or something. So I thought, well, maybe I would do a video. I said, well, my story is on my website, the videos and that, but for some reason she couldn't get into the website. So I thought, well, I'll make a video of my success story. And I also wrote another story. I wrote two stories actually when I got well. I'll do that. And then when somebody asks me, because I know in withdrawal, it's hard to read. It was very hard for me to read. And I know it's hard for a lot of people to read. It'd be a lot easier just to sit and listen to someone read it for them. So that's what I'll do. I'll read my recovery story first, then my success story. And I'll probably talk either as I go through or at the end of each one, I'll talk a little bit or something. I don't know. So I'll start with this one I wrote. It's my recovery story. I call it My Recovery. I wrote this in January 2012, okay, which was 2 years and 3 months after I quit drinking. I was sober for 2 years and 3 months. And it was also 17 months after I jumped from my benzos from Klonopin. So at 17 months, I still was not quite, I was pretty well. 18 months is when like all of the mental stuff had lifted. And then it took another 4 months, 22 months. I basically was healed then. But so this is at 17 months. I'm not quite there yet, but I can tell like I'm getting really close. Okay. This is a story of God's perfect love, a love that transcends anything I can even begin to comprehend. I had my doubts that I would ever be able to share this story with anyone. In fact, I was certain that I would never be able to think clearly enough to put it together, that I would never escape the unending terror and depression of 2 years to have the desire or courage to tell it. Actually, I didn't escape. I am being set free by the same Spirit who set Peter free from prison a couple thousand years ago. It's funny how we think we are walking the walk and doing our own God thing when almost out of nowhere, God puts a mountain in front of us and tells us to start climbing. And we shrink from it and believe that it can't be done. We whine, we complain. We know that we can't do anything without God, but we quickly forget that we can do all things with Him in His strength, not our own. I guess that's how I have lived most of my life. For so many years, I thought I was walking the walk. I had read the Bible through many times and had memorized lots of verses. I was a Gideon. I attended prayer breakfasts. I was even our Gideon camp president. I did lots of good things for others. I was a kind and generous person. I was strong. My list of good stuff was pretty impressive, at least to me. But something was wrong. I had known it for years. I knew exactly what it was, but I couldn't seem to do anything about it. My childhood had lots of heartache and tragedy. So much had been taken from me at an early age. As I grew into a teen in the 1960s, I simply lived by the words of the song, I Am a Rock. I thought Simon and Garfunkel had it right. There was no way for a heart of stone to be hurt. I looked at it as great mental strength, to be able to bear anything without feeling it. I thought I would be safe from any more pain and suffering. Somewhere in my mid-teens, I took my first serious drink. Subconsciously, I found that alcohol really helped me to maintain that heart of stone. Its numbing effect was perfect. As time went on, I drank more and more, believing that it was just a matter of me enjoying booze. I never consciously realized that it was the numbing effect, its ability to keep me from feeling anything, that I was after. As years went by, I was able to live life without realizing what the booze was doing to me. Alcohol is very subtle. It pretends to be your friend until it has you by the throat, and only then do you realize that your friend is your mortal enemy who has to be faced, or he will take everything from you. He will torture you, and then he will slowly kill you. The first hint I had of any problem came 14 years ago when I started having panic and anxiety attacks. In hindsight, I now know those were caused by the alcohol and some difficult life situations I was having at the time. Sadly, the doctors diagnosed me with panic disorder and clinical depression. This started a 13-year addiction to tranquilizers. Not knowing that my good friend alcohol was doing this to me, I continued drinking while taking the tranquilizers, a truly horrible and often deadly combination. As time passed, I never really was cured of the anxiety. The anxiety was actually getting worse over the years from the drinking and tranquilizers. I didn't realize it then because I would just drink more and more to compensate for the increasing anxiety. Of course, that made the anxiety worse, and I was caught in an endless loop of anxiety, booze, and tranquilizers. Sometime around 2000, it occurred to me that I may have a drinking problem. I had always considered myself to just be a person who was able to tolerate more alcohol than most people, but I seemed to be drinking more and more. Nevertheless, I continued drinking and taking the tranquilizers. It was around 2007 or 2008 that I realized I was probably an alcoholic, that if I took that first drink, I would take another 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. One Sunday, one of our church members gave a testimony about being an alcoholic who no longer drank. I talked to him later and found out he was going to AA. On December 26, 2007, I wrote myself a letter trying to logically convince myself to stop drinking. I was remorseful for the binge drinking I did the day before, Christmas Day. But with alcoholism, there is no logic. I started going to AA meetings. I managed 5 or 6 months of sobriety, but quit going to meetings and went back to drinking. Over the months, I tried to quit in other ways. I wrote myself another letter. I made drinking rules for myself, but I couldn't follow them for even one day. I bought a book, How to Quit Drinking Without AA. I listened to CDs and subliminal messages. Nothing worked. It seemed the harder I tried to quit, the more I drank. In the spring and summer of 2009, I went to the altar in church in tears many times and asked God to help me quit drinking. Nothing happened. In complete desperation, the last time I went to the altar, I asked God to make me quit drinking. I even gave him my permission to do whatever it would take. I remember vividly, very vividly, getting up from my knees and turning to go to my seat with a thought in my mind, what if I have to go through what I went through 13 years ago with a panic disorder and depression? What if God gets the sledgehammer out? I hoped that wouldn't be part of God's recovery plan. I was scared. It didn't take very long for that last prayer to be answered. A few weeks later, on October 20th, 2009, God got the sledgehammer out. I was driving to Shippensburg to see my 2 sisters. For no apparent reason, I started getting anxiety attacks. As I traveled, it got worse and worse. My visit with my sisters was filled with anxiety and fear. On the way back home, the anxiety attacks returned. Somehow, I knew that the alcohol was the cause of the anxiety and that it was demanding that I start drinking during the day. I had always been an evening drinker, but I was unwilling to drink during the day. I knew that would be the beginning of the end and would quickly destroy me and my family. By God's grace, I haven't had a drink since that day. It's October 20th, 2009. Over the next couple of weeks, I had lots of anxiety, but it was bearable. I fully expected it to fade with time. In the 3rd week, the bottom fell out. The anxiety became intense. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. I went to the doctor and was put on an antidepressant. I also convinced my doctor to increase my dose of tranquilizer to kill the anxiety. I now know that was the absolutely worst thing I could have done. Over 6 weeks, the anxiety did not improve, and I became suicidally depressed from the tranquilizer and the knowledge that I had to get off the tranquilizer somehow. I remember sitting at home alone one Saturday morning and feeling completely hopeless and suicidal. I called a lady from church. She told me to call the doctor, who then told me to go to the ER. I ended up in the psychiatric hospital on suicide watch for 3 weeks. I was taken off the tranquilizer in the hospital and given some different antidepressants that made me much worse. I endured 4 ECT treatments as well, a true nightmare. I left there a more broken man than I have ever been in my entire life. Gail picked me up on a Friday evening in February. Gail's my wife. It was just beginning to snow when we walked outside. I could barely stand or walk. I recall looking back at my footprints in the snow, thinking that I would soon be dead, not caring, and even hoping that it would be so. It was the most surreal moment of my life. At home, I had to go back on a smaller dose of the tranquilizer because the acute withdrawal from getting off The high dose was unbearable. As time went on, I did not improve and discovered that I would never recover until I was completely off the tranquilizer. It is only then that the nervous system can actually heal. It took 6 more months to finally be completely off. For 2 years, I have lived with the symptoms of withdrawal from tranquilizers. The darkest, blackest depression I've ever known, irrational fear and dread, and feelings of complete unreality. These were with me constantly, day after day after day for 2 years. Getting through each minute of every day was a monumental effort. I had to retire from my job because I could not function at work. I couldn't even go into the office and collect my things. My coworkers had to bring them to me. Relationships with others ended. I became a zombie, afraid of literally everything. Most of my mental ability disappeared, and I was certain it would never return. My nervous system was completely shot. The mental suffering has been indescribable. It seemed completely hopeless. There was nothing I could do to pull myself out of the pit of despair and suffering. The harder I tried to get out, the deeper the pit became, until I just sat there in the dark without a shred of hope. But God had a plan all along, and He was moving despite my misery. Throughout these 2 years, I could not feel God's presence at all. I felt abandoned by God. Even more, I felt condemned. At first, I prayed for a miraculous healing. After a couple months, I could only pray one word, Father. But that one word meant, Father, I hurt, I know you know. Please get me through this. If I make it out, make me the person you want me to be. I prayed it over and over and over. I got no response from Him until one day at church in May 2011. We were standing and singing a song one morning, and I heard a whisper, 6 words, so that you may know suffering. It wasn't repeated. It wasn't what I wanted to hear, but my eyes started to tear because I knew that the Spirit was letting me know that He was still there, that He was paying attention to me, that He was aware of my suffering, that there must be a reason for it. A few weeks later, another whisper, 3 words, to give hope. It still didn't make me feel any better. I was still in mental anguish, but I knew the reason for the suffering. As time passed, I very gradually started to be able to do things as I was being healed. For months, there was no pleasure in doing anything, but I could at least do them, albeit with great effort. As days and weeks have gone by, the pleasure has begun to slowly return. My mental ability has begun to return. The morning terrors have subsided. The black depression has lifted. Although there are still many very unpleasant symptoms of withdrawal, life is becoming livable again. Instead of feeling silence from God, I have moments where I am completely washed in the Spirit, moments when joy just pours over me, a joy more intense than any joy I have felt in my entire life. When I think about how this whole thing has happened, the timing, I am amazed. I begged God to make me quit drinking because my life was on the verge of destruction. God began the process a few weeks after that plea, but first He took care of something else in preparation. I was the treasurer of the church for a few years. In September 2009, I wrote a fairly comprehensive treasurer's manual just in case something would happen to me. Whoever came after me would at least have an idea where to start. I had no idea that in the very next month I would be very ill and would soon be unable to continue as treasurer. At the same time, I believe someone else in the congregation with small children was looking for a ministry they could do from home. They are now the treasurer. God was more interested in me being sober and well than He was in me being treasurer, but He made sure there was still a treasurer. After I was off the tranquilizer for a month, I became too ill to work. I was on sick leave for many months and decided to retire in June of 2011. During this time, Gail and I have been able to keep our grandson 3 days a week, something that Gail would not have been able to do if I had gone back to work. Our grandson has helped tremendously in God's healing process. Sometimes I think he was sent here because his pappy and grandma needed him about as desperately as anyone can need someone else. The little guy has been a huge part of my healing, part of God's grace. God has brought healing to me in so many ways. I know He is literally physically healing my nervous system. Only He can do that, but there has been so much more. He has worked through many other people, my incredible wife, Gail, and the precious heart and faith of a child who has somehow understood this whole thing and has believed God would get us through when I had trouble believing anything good. Countless prayers over these 2 years by countless people, words of encouragement spoken to me when I could give nothing in return. Jane, who may have literally saved me from taking my own life, her husband Jason, who traveled the road of alcohol abuse years ago, who knows the pain and who encourages me every week, my family that has waited more patiently than I have for me to return, our very dear grandson, the hundreds of people in an online forum, Benzo Buddies, who have suffered or are now suffering through tranquilizer withdrawal. We are all able to encourage each other in ways that no one else can because we each know the suffering. The blessings have been beyond anything I could have imagined. After 40 years of drinking, I have not picked up a drink in over 2 years. That by itself is an enormous miracle. An even bigger miracle is that I have absolutely no desire to drink anymore. It has been taken from me completely. Amazing. My own personal 40-year wilderness experience is over. The alcohol and tranquilizer-induced blackouts are over. After 13 years, I am no longer imprisoned by tranquilizers. This dwarfs the miracle of not drinking. Being able to break both addictions at once is something that is nearly unheard of. Most addiction specialists would say that it is humanly impossible. They are right. I had proven to myself time after time that I didn't have the strength to quit drinking, and just the thought of ever giving up tranquilizers was laughable. I had resigned myself to what I thought was a fact, that I would be addicted to tranquilizers for the rest of my life. But I have learned that when God has a plan, He gives the strength to carry it out. It might not be pretty or pleasant, and it might be unbearably painful, but that doesn't matter. He is getting me through this, getting me through the impossible. I have no idea how He is doing it. When I look back on these past 2 years, the overwhelming fear, despair, and hopelessness, I have no idea how I got to this place. God did it somehow, no matter. The important thing is that He is changing my heart. The alcohol and tranquilizers numbed me for so many years that I had almost totally lost the tender heart that I had as a child. As time goes on and I heal more, I am actually remembering and feeling what was in my heart as a boy. It's amazing, really. I'm feeling life again after so many decades of numbness. Just as His word says, the blessings God is pouring on me are more than I can hold. Most days now I have moments when I am completely overwhelmed by the Spirit's presence and I tear up. They aren't just tears of relief or tears of gratitude or tears of joy. They are much, much more. The best I can come up with is that they are tears of awe. My spirit is in awe of the Spirit of God. He has brought me through depths of suffering that I could not have imagined before, let alone believe that I could ever get through such suffering. My tears of suffering have been replaced by tears of awe. I asked Jesus to make me quit drinking, and He is doing so much more than I could have thought or asked. God has shown me at such a deep level that nothing is impossible with Him. I know that there is no pit I can dig or fall into that He is so deep that He can't and won't pull me out of it. We all know that, and when life is difficult or seems unbearable, we want Him to do the impossible right now or as soon as possible before the pit gets too deep. But we all know He doesn't usually work that way. Sometimes we have to sit in the pit for what seems like an eternity, but I have learned there is a reason for that. If He had healed me quickly, I have no doubt that I would have gone back to drinking and would be very ill now or dead. Instead, I am experiencing the greatest blessings of my life, the blessing of drawing closer to Him and experiencing the life He intended for me to have long before I was even born. The blessing of standing in speechless awe of over what He has done and is doing for me in me, what He has seen fit to bring me through. There are no words to adequately express my gratitude, my joy for what the Spirit has done. I am dumbfounded. I am in awe. God is changing me to the way He wants me, and He has chosen to do it through suffering. There is a quote from A.W. Tozer that rings true for me. It goes like this: "It is doubtful whether God can bless a man greatly until he has hurt him deeply." I am starting to see the blessings. Just as the pain and suffering of this journey have been indescribable, the blessings are equally indescribable and beyond anything I could have imagined. God still has a plan, and He will keep changing me until it's time to go back home. Okay, so that was the end of the original story. And then in January 2013, a year later, I wrote some more. And it's funny because I haven't updated this in like over 5 years now, but okay, and it continues. So many more things have improved in this past year. My mind has become much clearer. The crippling black depression of 2 years has never returned for even a moment. The severe depersonalization, derealization of several years is almost completely gone. I take no psych meds whatsoever. The constant severe heartburn for which I took Nexium for 15 years is gone, so I no longer take Nexium for that. My food allergies have disappeared. My sleep continues to improve. The biggest thing by far is that the Lord is literally transforming me and my life. He is making me the person He wants me to be, just as I had asked Him over and over in my prayers during the 2 years of suffering. I had been a very negative, cynical person for over 57 years of my life. That man is gone. I may be the most positive person I know now. For years, I let my past rule me. I let my difficult and painful past define me. That was an illusion, and I fed the illusion with alcohol and drugs, which only turned the illusion into an enormous monster that nearly destroyed me. And it is only because of my near destruction and God's hand of mercy that I am now thriving mentally, emotionally, and especially spiritually. So now I get strength from my past. I look back and say to myself, look what Jesus brought me through. Awesome. It makes me stronger for the here and now and for the future. Now I try to constantly look forward with anticipation and expectancy of what the Spirit is going to do to show God's love, power, and glory. I have seen Him do the impossible in healing me, and I have seen other miracles in this past year. I have seen the marriage of my daughter and son-in-law miraculously saved from certain ugly divorce. Both of them are being transformed. I have seen a suicidal friend rescued from the pit of depression and begin to improve after 10 years of misery. The best thing, I not only hope that more miracles will occur, but I am certain that they will. God's Spirit is moving in my life and in the lives of those around me in miraculous ways. God has opened doors for me to help others who are in the grip of addiction and mental anguish. He only asks me to walk through the door. He doesn't threaten me or make me feel guilty. He just points to the open door and asks, "What do you think?" When I was in my many years of addictions and suffering, I was spiritually blind. Even though I went to church, was involved in ministry, and read the Bible, I did not see life clearly. I could not see life clearly. The booze and benzos controlled my mind and soul. All that mattered to me was my next drink. But that is long over. Jesus did a miracle in me and for me. I remember very well the hopeless feeling in my addiction, and especially during my 2 years of severe depression when I was in withdrawal. That is the greatest lesson that I have learned in all of this. Yes, we can feel no hope. That is our brain, our nervous system lying to us. But God has also given us a spirit. I believe that when our spirit knows God's Spirit, we will always know there is hope. Our brain can't find the way out and tells us there is no way out. But the Holy Spirit tells us otherwise. Excuse me. For 2 years, my brain told me, forget it. There is no way out. You are toast. But the still small voice of the Spirit said, just hold on for one more day. Just hold on. His nearly silent voice kept me going literally minute to minute for 2 years. Our Creator is faithful and true. He is King of kings and Lord of lords. He has proven it to me in a way I cannot begin to describe properly. He loves us. That is who He is. That is what He does, especially in those times when we don't feel His love. The amazing thing is that He provides His love through us, through people. We are here to glorify Him and to love Him. We can only do that by loving each other. It's an awesome plan from our awesome Creator. All we have to do is love our Maker, love others, love ourselves, and allow ourselves to be loved. It's a plan that works if you work it. Okay, that's the end of my recovery story. Yeah, that was 5 years ago. So much more has happened. I mean, the website that I have, the videos that I do, the people I have talked to on the phone over the years, all kinds of stuff. Just amazing, really amazing. But it's an awesome plan that works if you work it. That's from AA. They always say at the end, it works if you work it, like the AA program, the 12 steps and all that. But so much. Yeah, I haven't read this in quite some time. That's yeah. He'll get us through. He gets us through. As I said in there, I have no idea how. I mean, it was Him. There was one day I remember lying on the floor in the bedroom across the hallway here, my face on the carpet saying, if I get through this, you got to do it. I'm done. And I even said, if I get through this, I will never take credit for any piece of strength that I will never claim strength because I have none. He did it all. He did it all. He really, really did. Okay, let me see what I got here for time. Well, 25 minutes. Okay, I'm about more than almost 3/4 of the way. So now here's my actual story on Benzo Buddies. Eli's story. It's in the success stories. Okay, and this is verbatim from what's there. So, well, I'm sitting here in the big plush easy chair. Okay, I wrote this actually. I was 2.5 years off benzos. I had been well for 8 months, but I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to have some sort of setback or something, because you hear sometimes of people, It says, well, I'm sitting here in the big plush easy chair in my family room, listening to the Moody Blues. The song was Your Wildest Dreams. I haven't heard it for years, but just happened to Google Moody Blues, and this is the first song that came up. I can barely think of a more appropriate song for this moment. 3 years ago, possibly to this very minute, I was ending a 3-week stay at a psych hospital in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. I spent 3 weeks there under suicide watch. I survived quite a bit during my stay at the hospital. A taper of 4 milligrams of clonazepam, or Klonopin, a failed trial of a tricyclic antidepressant, as well as a trial of Wellbutrin, both of which only served to intensify my misery. About halfway through my stay at the hospital, it was decided that I should undergo ECT in hopes of eradicating the Black Depression. So for that time, I was switched from clonazepam to Ativan because Ativan has a much shorter half-life. The reason for that was simply that ECT does not work with benzos in the brain. I had 4 ECT treatments given every other day. On the in-between days, I was put on what they called a mini withdrawal, no benzos at all until after the next ECT treatment. Of all the cruelty at that place, that was the worst. I was in constant acute withdrawal for a week and a half. I was forced to go to in-house AA meetings and also not just attend other therapy sessions, but also take part in them. An indescribably horrendous experience. On that Friday evening, about 1 hour after my last ECT treatment, my wife rescued me from that place, and I stumbled outside, down some steps, over a sidewalk, and across the parking lot. It had just begun to snow. I looked back at my footprints in the snow and wonder how I made those tracks. I felt like I wasn't even there, like I was nowhere, like I didn't even exist. Surreal, surreal, surreal. The depersonalization, derealization was unimaginable. I hoped and literally prayed that I would die before getting to the car, but I didn't. So, as I sit here now in my right mind, comfortable, at peace, and connected to reality, I am living beyond my wildest dreams. I thought this was an impossibility 3 years ago, even 15 months ago. Nothing is impossible. Nothing is impossible. One of the dozens of lessons I have learned from this journey. My complete story is very long and circuitous. I won't bore anyone with all the details because it would literally result in a book. The condensed abstract version is, I spent 40 years drinking alcoholically. At about the 28th year of drinking, I was getting panic attacks from the booze and some life situations. I went to the doctor. He gave me Xanax, which worked well for maybe 2 weeks. He also gave me Paxil, which threw me into a tailspin of panic attacks and suicidal depression. It took a year and a half and dozens of psych drug trials for me to emerge from that 3-day Paxil experience. The only thing that helped me emerge was the increased alcohol intake. Of course, I would switch to clonazepam over that time. And I took it every day while I also drank. I stayed on the clonazepam for a total of 13 years. I was told I would need it forever, and I believed it. In my 40th year of alcoholism, I finally quit drinking for good. After 2 weeks, I fell into unbelievable anxiety, panic attacks, and depression. I didn't realize for several more months that I would never be well again until I ditched the clonazepam, all of it. I was in severe tolerance withdrawal. After 1 to 2 months of tapering, I was completely off the benzo. Let the success story begin. It was actually closer to 3 months that I tapered. Okay, I am currently a few days shy of 30 months off clonazepam. Over the last year or so, I have thought about writing a success story. My biggest difficulty with that has been the question, What does success mean? At least to me. In the past couple of days, I have answered that question. The answer for me simply is the answer to another easier question. Am I at least as well as I was before this whole mess started? Before I got off the clonazepam, or maybe even before I started taking the clonazepam nearly 16 years ago? The answer to both parts of the question, yes, I am much, much better. In fact, I am better than I have ever been in my entire life. I am not exaggerating at all. From that perspective, I could have written this at about 22 months off. That is when I knew beyond a doubt that I was better than I had ever been in my entire life. I am calmer than I have ever been in my life. No booze or benzos required. They were only escalating my anxiety and depression. My sense of humor is huge, and I am able to laugh as I never did before. I am wiser than I have ever been. I can see deep meaning in so many aspects of life that I never even thought about before. My mental cognition, ability, and energy are off the charts now. Physically, I no longer take Nexium or any PPI for acid reflux. I took PPIs for 15 years, starting way back when I was originally prescribed benzos, 1997. Also, at about 18 months off, all my allergies disappeared. I had been severely allergic to most nuts and fruits for a couple of decades. Now I eat absolutely everything, except Brussels sprouts and tripe, only because I can't stand them. Pollen allergies left at the same time. I don't know if it's from getting off the benzos, but I'll take it. I do have a few minor lingering symptoms. My sleep could be better, but then I drank for decades. It can take years for alcoholics to regain good sleep. Tinnitus, like the ringing ears, is still hanging around, very common. And of course, there's almost always that perpetual song running through my head, especially in the morning. But I am able to at least change the record simply by suggestion. My mind is still very active, but I am easily able to direct the mental energy into good places. If I had to put a percentage on my healing, excuse me, it would easily exceed 100%. I am better mentally and spiritually than I've ever been, even long before benzos. Physically, my only real problem is some arthritis, which has nothing to do with benzos. I remember when I got out of the psych hospital, I was in severe acute withdrawal and had nearly 100 separate symptoms. There was only a handful that I didn't have or experience. They are virtually all gone with the exception of a few minor ones, which are only nuisances at worst. I always like looking at the healing timeline of different individuals to measure my own healing against. Here is mine. Okay, month 1, very similar to the weeks of tapering. Lots of anxiety, depression, depersonalization, derealization, insomnia, and restlessness. At the end of month 1, the bottom dropped out and symptoms increased in intensity by at least a factor of 10, but they were not as acute as those experienced in the psych hospital and immediately after discharge from the hospital, nor were there as many different ones. Okay, months 2 through 6. Little or no improvement noticed, really. The greatest hallmark was the extreme terror that would appear from nowhere at times. Morning terrors every morning, and extreme fear to get out of bed and face the day. Extremely sensitive to cold, noises, movement, and any other sensory input. Month 7. First noticeable improvement when I was able to go outside and do some yard work, even though I shook uncontrollably and was very fearful. Depersonalization, derealization was still nearly unbearable. Excuse me, extreme dizziness. Month 10. I recall the first morning I had an actual desire to do something, 10 or so minutes on the elliptical. Gradually improved in duration from there, as well as adding weight-bearing exercises. Otherwise, the symptoms remain pretty constant. Months 11 through 13, very little change in symptoms. Months 14 and 15. At the end of month 14, I had an awakening one morning, September 28, 2011, that I was well enough to possibly write something on Facebook for the first time in over 2 years. I wrote a couple sentences about being on a journey and finally beginning to return. It was the first social improvement since the whole thing started, and it was the first noticeable lifting of 2 years of depression. Morning dreads disappeared. Okay, that was month 14, 15. Okay, month 16. At my grandson's birthday party, I was confident and unafraid to drink the first cup of coffee I had had in over 2 years. This was about 1 month after my entry on Facebook. It was on October 30th, 2011, because I remember that very well because there was a snowstorm here in central Pennsylvania. It was snowing like crazy at his birthday party. This was the very day I knew that I was going to get well. The depression of over 2 years was nearly completely gone. In months 17 to 22, continued improvement in nearly all symptoms. Most noticeable was vastly improving cognition. Mental tasks were becoming much easier and creating no anxiety or panic. Very calm. In month 22, my confidence was finally at a level which allowed me to take on a job requiring a high level of mental cognition and emotional calmness. In months 23 to the present, which is month 30, while the mental symptoms of anxiety and depression had already vanished, other lingering symptoms have improved or disappeared, usually without me noticing. Heart palpitations are gone, inner vibrations are gone. The only burning sensations now sometimes when I wake up from a nap. Depersonalization, derealization is very mild now. I had that one long before withdrawal began back in my drinking days. As I close, I honestly believe that my story is one of the more extreme ones, with the decades of alcoholism, 13 years of clonazepam use, and 3 weeks of torture in a psych hospital. This is a doable journey by anyone really. There is nothing special about me. It just takes time. You have to hold on, and when you think you can't hold on any longer, you have to hold on. You may not feel hope through much of the journey, but you have hope. It is right there in the deep recesses of your very being. It is inside every one of us and constantly whispers to us. Don't let the shouting of your ailing brain convince you that it's not there. It is there. It is speaking, constantly speaking truth and saying to hold on one more minute, one more hour, one more day, until you are one more healed man or woman, who then becomes a voice of hope for someone else to hear over the noise of their ailing brain. Hold on, just hold on, and you will heal. It's a promise. Okay, so that was my success story in Benzo Buddies, Eli's story. Okay, where am I at here? 37 minutes. Let's see, and I have gotten better since then, even like the physical stuff. I still have a little bit of physical stuff here and there, but like mentally and emotionally, it just seems like it gets better and better. I don't know. It's amazing, really. But yet, all of the journey was just the things I did to myself. The alcoholism for 40 years, 13 years of Klonopin, and doing them both together and all that. To me, that's extreme. Like, so it's not. I know a lot of people have gone a lot longer than 22 months. I basically felt I was healed at 22 months, and I know many of you have gone a lot longer than that, and didn't even take benzos as long as I did, or didn't do a lot of the things to yourselves that I did. So it's not a matter of, the healing process is not a matter of the extremeness of what you did to yourself. It's more a matter of like your genetics and how these drugs affected you. And it's not the fact that you're taking so long that you have like so many different kinds of symptoms and they come and go, or for some of you, they don't, it seems like they haven't gone anywhere. They just kind of stay at the same place. It's not a function of the amount of damage or the permanence of damage. That's not it at all. It's more, we all have basically the same damage, but genetically, some of us are able, just because of our genetics is all, to get to a place where we feel better faster, and some take longer. That's all that it is. But these are my two stories. The first one, my recovery story, was I had written that at month 17, and I knew I was getting better. I still was on the journey, and I talked about that some in the story. And then Eli's story, that was my success story on Benzo Buddies. That was 2.5 years then, and I knew life was good. I remember sitting in the big chair downstairs and and writing that story. It was awesome. So anyway, that's what I have here. This is, I will post this. Well, you're going to know this. I'm going to post this, just the link to it. It'll be a unlisted video, and I'll post the link somewhere, and then you'll be able to watch it. And yeah, I gave you two stories. I don't know if that's a bonus or if that's a second story is a torment. I don't know. It's but anyway, that's what I have here. I've probably written other stories too. There are other videos on the website if you don't watch those, but you're healing. I always say this on my videos. You're healing. That's excuse me. My throat's dry. I did like a 50-minute video almost right before this one. I had some lunch and then I came back up here. You are healing. That is a truth. That there is nothing. Every single person going through this, no matter what your symptoms are or how you feel, you are healing. That's a truth. That is what is happening. It's just the fact that you don't heal it doesn't mean you're not healing it, because you are healing. And you will get better. You will start to feel better. Hopefully, before too long, someone will come up. They will find a way to get through this faster. I am confident that's going to happen. But until then, it's a day-to-day journey. It really, really is. And for my first story, though, my recovery story, the treasure on this side of withdrawal, on this side of the healing, is amazing. It really, I can't even describe it to you. Just as we can't describe the horrible suffering of withdrawal to somebody who's never experienced it, I can't describe adequately to you how good it is to be on this side and how indescribably joyous it is. It's just, life is so good on this side. Everything is so alive and so much energy, and it's indescribable. What's indescribable, and you will know that once you get here, and you're going to get here. You will. It's just it just takes time. It's a day-to-day thing. Sometimes it's minute to minute. There were times where it was just a 1 minute at a time for me. I would sit and watch the minute hand on a clock. I would do 1 minute at a time, and I know right now it's sad to think it's like that, but the suffering, God doesn't waste suffering. He really does not. There is a reason for this, and it turns out to be something really, really good. Like once you get through this, like the purpose of your life, you will understand. You understand better once you get to this side, and you will. So take care, and I hope this thing loads okay and everything, and that there's no problem with that. Hang in there. You're going to get better. I promise you. Bye-bye.